como hemos visto en el caso de Cuba hace poco, gracias a Dios ha habido un triunfo con una resolución histórica de condena a Cuba, que ha sido una de los avances en credibilidad de un Parlamento Europeo que ha perdido muchísima credibilidad en las últimas décadas con ese apaciguamiento permanente hacia esa ideología.
El caso que se ha mencionado de Cuba, que es la cabeza de la víbora, es clarísimo. Estamos, algunos gobiernos, con directa connivencia con el régimen totalitario, criminal, asesino de Cuba, desde todos los puntos.
Vemos al señor Borrell, que el otro día defendía a Cuba, decía, ¿por qué no se meten ustedes con otros países donde se violan también los derechos humanos? Como diciendo, dejen ustedes en paz a Cuba.
The most emblematic case is undoubtedly that of Cuba, where I believe we should be much more decisive in isolating the regime.
La protección a Cuba que hemos visto aquí en la Unión Europea, a un alto representante, señor Josep Borrell, con todo su equipo del Servicio Exterior, protegiendo a la dictadura cubana.
El régimen de los Castros lleva 62 años condenando a su propio pueblo a la represión, a la miseria, o como decía Osvaldo Payá, a la negación del derecho a tener derechos, ¿no? Durante años el régimen de los Castros ha servido de plataforma desde la que financiar y promocionar la desestabilización de sistemas democráticos y la expansión del marxismo en todo el planeta, y la influencia exterior de Cuba es muy superior a la que se desprende del peso demográfico y económico del país, porque realmente eso es lo que mejor sabe hacer el régimen cubano.
Ahí que tenemos a una Unión Europea donde tenemos un alto representante que está protegiendo a Cuba. Cuba es el centro realmente de este narcotráfico y Cuba tiene una protección objetiva por parte de la Unión Europea hoy en día, lo cual es absolutamente inaudito y obsceno. Sí, hola, buenos días en América, buenas tardes en Europa a todos los que se hayan conectado con nosotros, bienvenidos. Quiero aquí decir una serie de palabras en español también para todos aquellos que se han comunicado con nosotros preguntando que por qué se anunciaba en inglés este webinar, si era sobre Cuba. Digo, sí, es sobre Cuba, pero nosotros tenemos que hacer webinars en dos idiomas prácticamente, fundamentalmente, que es en español, por supuesto, y en inglés también, porque tenemos que incorporar a todo lo que son las fuerzas de solidaridad hacia Cuba, a toda Europa, y vamos a utilizar el inglés como lengua franca hoy en este debate. Prometo, por supuesto, que tendremos muchos debates sobre Cuba y sobre todos los países iberoamericanos. En el grupo ECR los tendremos también en español. El grupo de acción política del Eurolat, el ECR, se ha constituido precisamente para que creemos estos lazos, estas sinergias, estas conexiones entre demócratas de toda Iberoamérica con Europa. Queremos crear una gran red de influencia y de generación de contenidos para la defensa de la democracia allá donde exista, que están siendo asaltadas por la subversión comunista, y para conseguir democracias allá donde reina la dictadura en algunos sitios tanto tiempo como es en Cuba, 63 años ya de miseria, de terror, de miedo, de ausencia, de carencias y de carencias sobre todo de libertad. Venezuela, Nicaragua, son muchos ejemplos. Ahora vemos como Perú está ahí, Bolivia, donde Áñez, la presidente Áñez, interina Áñez, está en la cárcel de una forma injusta y tremenda después de haber hecho un traspaso legal, constitucional, impecable de poderes, a quien ahora la ha metido en la cárcel y está deteniendo y también torturando y llevando al país a la dictadura, que es Luis Arce, un obediente, digamos, ejecutor para Evo Morales, y todo lo que es el Foro de Sao Paulo, que también está en activo aquí. Now I will switch to English. I want to present you now all the participants. We have 4 participants today in this round webinar on Cuba. We saw what happened on the 11th of July on the island. We had a real uprising, a popular uprising, which was spontaneous, which was very forceful, which was enthusiastic, and it asked not, as some people and some observers, some left-wing observers mainly in Europe and in America, said that they asked for medicines because of the COVID and for some difficulties in the supplies. No, they asked mainly directly for freedom, for democracy, and they asked for the end of this dictatorship, which is now ruling 63 years on the road, in a human catastrophe as it is, of this rich island, former rich island, which has been tortured since then, with millions in exile and millions inside as prisoners of a regime which is incapable, absolutely incapable, of giving a decent and dignified life to the population 63 years after promising paradise, after killings, after shootings, after tortures, after hundreds of thousands of prisoners in all these decades. We have a country which is poor, is on the last positions in the poorest countries, having been one of the richest. That happens to be the same case in Venezuela. It's more recent, it's 20 years. In 20 years, Venezuela has managed, the communists in Venezuela, mainly supported by the Cuban communists, have managed to destroy the richest country in America, on the American continent. And they have destroyed it completely and put it with Cuba and with Haiti on the last post of power, of poverty. We are going to speak today with very significant actors in this crisis. We have a new situation now after a very important and historic resolution of the European Parliament, which was approved recently, and which gives us finally the tools to the European parliamentarians. To me, it gives us the tools to put pressure and leverage on the regime, on the communist regime, and to finish for once and for all this agreement, which only gives supplies, financial aid to the Communist Party and to the little group of privileged apparatchiks who lives that are benefiting from these millions that come from the European taxpayer, and which is really obscene that we are financing this sort of things. So we have a resolution. We want to put sanctions on personal sanctions on some of the leaders, of the responsible people of this of the repression. We want to signify, and we want to single out people who are active in this repression and are responsible from the top, but also not only on the top. The people should that have to take care if they participate in the repression, because they will be punished. That's one of the steps we want to take. The other one is, of course, the suspension of the agreement of Europe with the European Union with Cuba, which is this kind of financial help, which is absolutely unbearable, morally unbearable, to have. It's 5 years old now, and it's really a shame. And we have Josep Borrell, the High Representative of the European Union in foreign policy and security, who defends this. But we are going to, after this resolution, we are going to stop this obscene financing of the dictatorship of Cuba. In this sense, I want now to present, without any more delay, to present our participants. Our participants are Rosa María Payá. Everybody should know her. She's the founder of Cuba Decide. She is as well a director, it's director of the foundation. Of the Foundation of Pan-American Democracy, excuse me, and she is the daughter of my dear Osvaldo Payá, who was a hero, a Cuban hero, which we always remember, who was killed, and whose killing was ignored. What is even worse, we see it makes it even more let's say impossible to forget and to bear that we had this assassination of Osvaldo Payá and his companion, and nobody reacted as they should have. Nobody really accused the regime of these killings, but everybody did so as if they believed that this wasn't a car accident, as the Cuban regime said. It was really one of these enormous hypocrisies of the democracies, which we are paying dearly in our own system, in our own moral system. Then we will have Freyser Martínez, who is in Cuba, who is in Camagüey, and we hope that the line gives us a possibility of really having his testimony and having him here with us, explaining us from inside what is happening and the expectations. And we have, of course, and we are in the ECR group, we have the vice president of the ECR party, who is Radek Fogiel from Poland, and who is one of these members that of these solid members that we have in this group, in the conservative or reformist group, for having a foreign policy, an active foreign policy with moral muscle, for fighting for democracy all over the world, but very especially in our continent, our next continent, which is Ibero-America. Now I will give the Rosa María Payá is there. I will give the word. Yeah, please. Tell us, we haven't spoken in the last months, but we have been texting, WhatsApping, and with great enthusiasm about the resolution. Tell us a little bit about the resolution, but and the effect on Cuba. But tell us also about how is now the moment in this fight after the 11th of July.
Of course. Thank you so much, President Tertsch and Vice President Radek Fogiel for this invitation and for all your work and your support for this resolution to happen. It has been a work of many years for you, but also for us, trying to convince the European Union, specifically the European Parliament, that the right thing to do is to ask for the suspension of the agreement, at least for the application of Article 85 of the Human Rights Clause, because that clause has been violated by the Cuban regime from the first second in which that agreement actually entered in this temporary phase that it has been for 5 years already, a very shameful phase, as you just mentioned, President Tertsch. I'm very, very happy to have here also Freyser Martínez, Cuba ECR promoter from Camagüey, that together with many, many, many other Cubans, with hundreds of thousands of Cubans, are demanding freedom from inside of the island and paying a very high price for doing so. I'm taking the highest possible risk, which is their own life, by doing this. And we know that we are facing and fighting a dictatorship that is ready to kill people. They did it against my father and against Harold Cepero in 2012, and they did it again this July 11 against unarmed, peaceful young people that were only chanting freedom and down with the dictatorship in the street. They shot down people in the street with real bullets, shots in the stomach, in the back, in the arms, in the leg. Is on video. The whole world have seen the state terrorism applied live and in real time against an unarmed population that is only demanding what is basic to end with the other crisis that the Cuban people is suffering right now, with the humanitarian crisis, with the economical crisis, with the political crisis, with the sanitary crisis. The root of all these crises are in the dictatorship, in the failed and corrupt policies that they have applied for 62 years right now. And if something was clear, and is even clearer from July 11, is that the Cuban people is convinced that to get out of the crisis is the end of the dictatorship. And that was what happened on July 11. Hundreds of thousands of Cubans in the streets demanding freedom peacefully, and being confronted by a military force using all their power against peaceful people. The repression has been brutal. From the Fundación for Pan-American Democracy, from our Incident Report Center, we have registered at least 952 detainees from July 11. More than 400 of them remain in prison while we are talking. And in those more than 400 people, there are many, the most part of them are young Cubans, unknown Cubans, that took to the streets to demand freedom. But they are also leaders of the opposition, as José Daniel Ferrer, that have been not only detained but disappeared, is missing from since July 11. Nobody in his family or in Unión Patriótica de Cuba, his organization, nobody, no a single promoter of Cuba ECR have been able to talk with him, to see him. Actually, many of us are demanding a proof of life of José Daniel Ferrer, and since July 11, the regime kept him incommunicado, which is a very illustrative example of what happened with the citizens in Cuba that dare to claim for human rights and for freedom. They are holding incommunicado probably the most important and more visible leader of the opposition inside the island in this moment. Imagine what they are doing with these hundreds of young people, of unknown young people that is right now behind bars only because they dare to claim for freedom and for an opportunity to pursue happiness in the way that they decide. It's a very complex and a very hard situation for the Cuban people, but something is clear is that the state terrorism that the Cuban regime, that the crimes against humanity and the state terrorism that the Cuban regime applies from the power against the people does not end within the Cuban people. It goes beyond the infiltration of the Cuban state security, the connections with the drug dealer mafias in Latin America, the participation, for instance, and the coordination of the collapse of the democracy in Venezuela, and the support and co-direction of Venezuela since Havana, or the fact that we cannot talk about the regression of democracy and the dictatorship already imposed by Daniel Ortega in Nicaragua without the participation and the support of the Cuban regime, or the fact that Yanina Añez is right now behind bars. And in my opinion, part of the reason is the revenge of the Cuban state security, that it has very good relations with Evo Morales and with the Arce government, because of the role that the constitutional government of Bolivia had in exposing the infiltration of the Cuban regime in Bolivia and in the rest of the region. I mean, they exposed that from 702 supposed doctors, Cuban doctors, working in Bolivia during the Evo Morales administration, 497 were not even doctors, hasn't even a degree in medicine, and they were there mainly because they had an espionage work to do. That was exposed by the constitutional government of Bolivia, and that's why it's so important also that the coordinations of the democratic world, including the European Parliament, but also the European governments and the Latin American governments, react against the threat that the Cuban dictatorship and its criminal apparatus represent for the whole region. I think that the resolution that just passed in the European Parliament has been a big step in the right direction, being ready and bold enough to say it's time to apply the democratic clause. It's time to go and step ahead and to impose sanctions against those criminals that are ready to shut down on our people on the streets. Now, the second big push is to make that resolution that express the most part of the will of the European Parliament to make it happen, to call the attention of the European Union, specifically of the External Action Service, specifically of Josep Borrell, that have been somehow justifying the Cuban regime to make him coherent, which what is not only the desire and the will of the European Parliament, but also what is the logic action to take if we analyze and we respect and we cherish the European values that conform the European Union. We hope that not only Borrell, but also the democracies in Latin America pay attention to what the European Parliament is saying, that at the end of the day is to support the Cuban people in a very specific and single demand, which is the recovery of our sovereignty. And for doing so, we have to start by denouncing the illegitimacy of that regime and acting in consequence with that illegitimacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosa María. Thank you very much for your words.
Thank
I
you.
know that regretfully you have to leave us now.
Yes, but I really hope to see you in the next forum, and looking forward for that visit to Havana, and looking forward for welcoming you in Havana, and for actually taking these actions that the Cuban people so much desire and so much need, which is the real support to their more basic demand, which is freedom, and that freedom requires the action of the international community. Thank you so much, President Tertsch.
Thank you, Rosa María. When we walk together in the Malecón in La Habana, then things have been changed. Will have changed already a lot.
We have to push it.
I am very hopeful that it will take not too long now, and we have here Radek. We have an example. I always think about, and I always give the hope that I lived in one of these experiences you never forget. In my experience in Poland, when Poland was liberated by themselves, and Poland liberated the whole Eastern Europe, and put in motion this liberation of whole Eastern Europe. That was Solidarność. That was 10 years of fight. It was 50 years of fight since 39, practically. But it was this, from the moment of the hope that Jan Pavel II, Drugi, gave in 79, till the first elections where I was in the June, that was June 89, 10 years of heroic fight against communism, and success for the whole European part that had been enslaved. So Radek Fogiel, Vice President of the ECR, we welcome you first of all, and I would like you to have an opinion, because you, the people who have experienced this, the historic experience you have, are now showing every day, and showing in the European Union, giving us lessons of resilience, of resistance, of keeping faith, and keeping the defense of their own values in a way which is always a great example for all of us. That's why it's a great honor to have you here, and I give you the word. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Herman, and thank you, Rosa and Maria, for sharing this with us. This is, I think, of the biggest importance that we and all people that are watching live tonight, the others that will rewatch it later, that they can hear firsthand about the situation in Cuba right now. Thank you, Herman, for your kind words about Poland, and I think this is true. There are, although I might be a little biased, but there are probably a few countries that can understand and cherish freedom as much as we in Poland do, because a lot from our latest 300 years history was about fighting for freedom. That's how we know how important that is, and that's why we are always very dedicated to helping those who still fight this fight. Whether this is Latin America, whether this is Cuba, or our neighboring country, Belarus, which is suffering under Lukashenko's authoritarian regime. So what I wanted to say on behalf of ECR party is that we do not limit ourselves as the same way as they don't do it in European Parliament when it comes to our friends for the ECR group. We do not limit ourselves just to European matters and just the European continent or just to EU member countries. We as conservatives believe that freedom is the right of everyone and every nation, and we will always support struggles to regain freedom and to establish a democratic government in countries which need doing this, and the countries who want to do this. That's why we support the Cuban opposition as well, and I'm extremely happy to see how the next generation represented here by Rosa María is going into the footsteps of their parents. In this case, her courageous father, who's a legend of Cuban opposition and who sacrificed his life in this fight for free Cuba. What I was thinking about while listening to our dear guest was that maybe this might be the case when they say it's always the darkest just before the dawn. Because I do remember, I'm of course too young myself to remember the times of the darkest communist regime in Poland, but a lot of my friends, a lot of my political party colleagues, they fought back in the 60s and in the 70s, and then they say that some of them didn't realize or didn't dare to hope that they will watch the fall of communism during their lifetime. And then it was 1981 when Solidarity was created, and then after the dark hours of Marshall State, there was 1989, and there was freedom, and there were first semi-democratic and then fully democratic elections. So I do really hope that what we are observing, what we were observing earlier this year in Cuba, the protests, the rise of the civic society, but also what could be observed in Belarus after the election fraud during presidential elections, the biggest protests and the biggest opposition gatherings in the history of Lukashenko's regime. I really hope this is a sign that even as this might not seem very possible for us from where we're standing right now, I really hope this is a sign that these regimes are slowly, very slowly, maybe internally for now, but they are collapsing. And I think what can be done is we, all supporters of freedom, we should make sure that the voice of the freedom fighters is heard. We should make sure that the international community is very vocal about the human rights, about democracy, about the ability of self-deciding of people in countries like Cuba or other Latin American countries. And because why is it so important? Because I do remember from my own country's history how important it was to have the support of people like, of course, mentioned before, John Paul II, who was the best ambassador of his empire, as Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Union. This was of crucial importance in succeeding back here in Poland. And I think this is our time right now to do our part to make sure that at the end of the year, of the decade, or when the time comes, there are free nations who can decide about how they want to live their lives, how they want to develop their country. And I really hope that this can be achieved during our lifetime. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Radek Fogiel, Vice President of the ECR party. Thank you very much. As Poland, as a victim of the appeasement, knows a lot about that, and we are seeing this continuous appeasement in the towards in front of these communist dictatorships. We are seeing that in the democracies, and it's rather shameful. We have had it very long in the European Union. We are seeing it. We saw it with China. Now we have a report on China, which starts a new era, I think, in the relations, with more truth inside for this dictator, cruel, enormous, cruel dictatorship in China. But we have to see that the whole danger we have dangers all over the places, but the danger in Latin America, in the Ibero-American sphere, has a double danger also, because it tries to penetrate Europe, and it tries to penetrate Europe with this combination, with this very dangerous combination, which is organized crime and communist movement together. They are working together since many decades. They started in the guerrilla, in the FARC and ELN, the Colombian terrorists and communist guerrillas, which started to finance themselves with cocaine. And now we have the huge industry of the drug trafficking from the drug traffickers cartels in Mexico to Argentina. We have them all financing and working together with the communist movements and the destabilizing anti-democratic movements with the industry of the drug trafficking and the organized crime. It's an enormous danger also for Europe, because they have put now a step in Europe. They have a bridgehead, because they came into Europe, into Spain. They conquered the youth movement of the protest movement. They capitalized it. They Leninized it in a communist organization, and they made Podemos, and Podemos is today in the government of Spain. And we have the enormous connections from the Socialist Party and the Communist Party. We have enormous connections to Cuban dictatorship and to Venezuelan criminal mafia, which is leading the regime. And this brings us to why there is sometimes this obscene appeasement towards these regimes, and that is because the connections of the Spanish left, which is the Spanish left of Mr. Borrell, and from his team, is the Spanish left, which is deeply implicated in everything what happens in these countries, which is quite obscure and very, very nasty. I want to try to get Freyser Martínez in Cuba. He's in Camagüey. We got a connection, and we're going to try it again to see if he's there. It was a very bad connection, and I fear the regime is again doing everything possible, and that is a lot, to interfere and make impossible to the Cubans to speak and to speak the truth to the world and through this cameras and through the wire. I fear the connection is not there, but we are going to try again, Luis, please. Is it possible? I'm asking the technicians. No. I'm told there's no connection whatsoever now, and they say they are convinced it is an official interference of the line, that he has been silenced. Freyser Martínez was going to speak here about the situation in Cuba, about the fears, the hopes, the needs of the Cubans, and he is not allowed, as so many millions of Cubans, he is not allowed by the dictatorship, by this communist dictatorship, to do it. I can remember, Radek, when it happened, the connections were interfered. When I was in Warsaw in 85, 86, we had problems sometimes I was a journalist in these times. I used to be a journalist. And we had difficulties, and all the dissidents had difficulties. And finally it worked, and suddenly the Polish people took over and got the democracy they were fighting for. And I'm sure the Cuban people will get their democracy. Finally, we will stop this help, this absolutely shameful, unbearable help that the dictatorship gets from democracies. We have to denounce it every day, so that really we expose the people who are collaborating with the criminals who are in charge in La Habana, and who are in charge in Caracas, and who are in charge in Managua, and who are in charge in La Paz again. We have to denounce and expose all these connections that they have in the democracies, where people from very comfortable places, they are helping criminals to make their own people suffer. As I say, Radek, I am very, very glad that we got finally this resolution on Cuba. We got a resolution asking for freedom for Áñez, who is imprisoned by the narco-communist regime of Luis Arce, and I am and ECR is proposing and defending the candidacy of Janine Áñez for the prize, for the Sakharov Prize of the European Parliament. I hope really it is, with all respect, due respect to all other candidacies, which are very, very extremely good and respectful. With all respect, I think the prize for Janine Áñez would be an enormous signal to honor the dignity of this woman, who is in jail because she did her constitutional duty under a pact with the European Union and the Organization of American States, OEA. So the European Union has a responsibility for Janine Áñez, and Borrell, the High Representative, has been ignoring the calls and the resolution which asks for the freedom of Áñez in Bolivia immediately, and he has done absolutely nothing. His silence is absolutely complete, and it is a guilty silence and an accomplice silence. I think Áñez is, as Rosa María said, she's in jail, among other things, because she exposed the Cuban connection, the Cuban Secret Service all over Latin America, and helping these connections of the drug dealers, these connections of the destabilization of the democracies, this attacks in Chile. There's 11 stations of the metro, of the railway, which burned in the same moment, were burning, and they were assigned for these disorders, which intimidated, in fact, the government, and who brought the government into this path of a constituent assembly, which is kidnapped from the beginning, kidnapped by the far left and the communists. In this sense, as I say, Cuba is not only a dictatorship, and a monstrous dictatorship for their own people. Cuba is a danger, is an enormous danger for the other countries, and is only exporting, since 60 years ago, is only exporting violence, hate ideology, weapons, drugs, and as I say, terrorism, and misery. So as I say, it's our duty to denounce it. It's our duty to fight against it, Radek. And I think the ECR and the group Eurolat has a really important role there. I give you the word for finishing our meeting, our webinar, and I have to saying that I'm sorry that we couldn't have Freyser Martínez as we wanted, as we hoped, and he has been blocked by the regime. Please, Radek, if you want to close, please, this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I absolutely agree with what you said. How important it is for us in the ECR to be champions of freedom, and to speak on behalf of those people who are silent. And we could see it with our own eyes. We could see it real life, how the regime is trying to silence those who oppose it. And I think the question of Sakharov Prize is a very good example, and a very symbolic one, because recently, during the ECR group meeting, we decided that we will support María as the candidate for the Sakharov Prize of the European Parliament. And let's not forget this. This is the same prize that was once awarded to Osvaldo Payá for his accomplishments in the fight for Cuban freedom. So if this can happen, if this can be achieved, this will be a link between those two. That's why I really hope this can be supported, and the Sakharov Prize can be granted. Once again, thank you very much for organizing this webinar. Thank you for inviting our guests. Unfortunately, the regime is so afraid of truth, is so afraid of free speech that it's trying to silence one of them. But it only encourages us to be more vocal about fighting for freedom. Thank you very much for joining everyone who was watching this webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Radek. Thank you very much to all the audience. Thank you very much to Rosa María, and thank you, Freyser Martínez. Our thoughts are with you, and we know that you wanted to speak here. You will speak free someday. I'm sure about that. And the people who are now forcing your silence will be in the dustbin of history. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Como hemos visto en el caso de Cuba hace poco, gracias a Dios ha habido un triunfo con una resolución histórica de condena a Cuba, que ha sido uno de los avances en credibilidad de un Parlamento Europeo que ha perdido muchísima credibilidad en las últimas décadas con ese apaciguamiento permanente hacia esa ideología.
El caso que se ha mencionado de Cuba que es la cabeza de la víbora, es clarísimo. Estamos algunos gobiernos con directa connivencia con el régimen totalitario, criminal, asesino de Cuba, desde todos los puntos.
Vemos al señor Borrell, que el otro día defendía a Cuba, decía, ¿por qué no se meten ustedes con otros países donde se violan también los derechos humanos? Como diciendo, dejen ustedes en paz a Cuba.
The most emblematic case is undoubtedly that of Cuba, where I believe we should be much more decisive in isolating the regime.
La protección a Cuba que hemos visto aquí en la Unión Europea a un alto representante, señor Josep Borrell, con todo su equipo del Servicio Exterior, protegiendo a la dictadura cubana.
El régimen de los Castros lleva 62 años condenando a su propio pueblo a la represión, a la miseria, o como decía Payá, a la negación del derecho a tener derechos, ¿no? Durante años el régimen de los Castros ha servido de plataforma desde la que financiar y promocionar la desestabilización de sistemas democráticos y la expansión del marxismo en todo el planeta, y la influencia exterior de Cuba es muy superior a la que se desprende del peso demográfico y económico del país, porque realmente eso es lo que mejor sabe hacer el régimen cubano.
Ahí que tenemos a una Unión Europea donde tenemos un alto representante que está protegiendo a Cuba. Cuba es el centro realmente de este narcotráfico y Cuba tiene una protección objetiva por parte de la Unión Europea hoy en día, lo cual es absolutamente inaudito y obsceno.